been a kind of a leap in my ability to focus, my ability to prioritize. Even and as Michael said at the beginning, I speak a lot now to the specifics of the ADHD brain. But what I've discovered over time, and the deeper I get into this, and we'll talk about it, is that the things that work for the ADHD brain are actually things that affect that every business, every entrepreneur should be doing. So, with that preamble, I'll just get into what I'm going to go over today. I'm going to talk a little bit about me, not too long. We're going to talk about ADHD myths and reality because I think there is a lot of myths. There's versus reality. ADHD is thought of as there's a lot of when you say ADHD, people certain things come to mind, and as I learned about ADHD through my own experience with it and started learning about how it really works and how brains work, it was like, oh my gosh, this is very different than what I thought. So I think that's really important to do that. We're going to talk about ADHD superpowers and kryptonite. And we're going to talk about focus is everything, and three places where that really is. It comes in every day for a business, for an entrepreneur, and then we're going to talk about the power of the 2 hour workday framework. So let's get right into it, shall we? So first about me, as Michael said, I from the outside, you know, if you look at me from the outside, you'd say, hey, that guy's been pretty successful. Uh, I started was a startup founder. My first startup Revelation was founded in 2007, and then in 2008. Won a little angel contest here. I live in Portland, Oregon. Portland keeps a little bit weird, even in the entrepreneurial community, but it was a good time. Took that to a successful exit in 2014, and then worked for the company that acquired us for 3 years. As Michael alluded to, is became a CMO of $100 million company. And then after my 3 years there, became built a multi six figure coaching practice, and helping primarily focused on startup founders from the seed to Series A phase. And so from the outside, a lot of success, a lot of things to celebrate. But on the inside, it was a very different experience, very different landscape. I navigated the whole journey with almost constant overwhelm. I didn't realize at the time how much harder I was working to focus and to drive things forward. As I got older and my energy level drops, as it does, and you get into your 50s, unfortunately, it started to highlight that, I didn't have that youthful energy that I could really push through. And I could look back and look over and see, wow, I've got all these brilliant ideas that just never stop coming, and yet I don't seem to follow through on them. They feel like they're half executed. And I think this is one of the really challenging things is that I knew I was underperforming what I was capable of. I think that is one of the biggest challenges with ADHD is, and we're going to go into exactly why that happens and why it can lead to depression and anxiety so much, is because you're underperforming. I knew I was underperforming. I knew there was more I could be doing. I knew there was more that I was leaving on the table. And because of that, I could never enjoy downtime. So even when I had success, and I remember pushing refresh on uh, my bank account uh, browser the day we had the exit, and I was waiting for the funds to show up in the bank account, and they finally showed up. And you would think it would be like, yes, massive celebration, but the real feeling was relief. It was just like, I can put down, I kind of beat another deadline. And that's been a pattern through my life where, when your brain never rests, you never get downtime. And over time, that becomes really problematic. And so 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And as I got to learn more about it, and I got to understand, well, how it actually works, and this is what we're going to go through a bit today, is like it's been transformational because all these patterns I had in my life, all the way back, suddenly started making sense. Things that why I was overwhelmed, why I felt a very sensitive to rejection, why I felt very overwhelmed all the time and couldn't relax and couldn't celebrate things, and things that were obviously good and and why couldn't just like focus and things like that? All of a sudden, it started to make sense. And there's nothing more powerful, I think, in life than really understanding how you work and be able to step into that awareness of it and then leverage that to like say, okay, I can work with me rather than trying to figure out what isn't working. So things that were I had perceived suddenly as character flaws or defects suddenly was like, oh, it's just how my brain works, and I can work with that. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So first of all, the more I get into ADHD, the more I think it's possibly the worst named disorder ever. Um, Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The reason why it's so badly named is um, that it's not a deficit of attention; it's a surplus. We're going to talk about more about later. And there's not always hyperactivity involved. I was never a hyper kid, so I never thought I was ADHD. I was like, I'm pretty chill and weird, but the but that is a certain type. There's different types of ADHD. One of them is called inattentive, and one of them is called hyper, and one of them is called combined. And so, but what happens when people think about ADHD, they think about, hey, it's like that dog in Up, just chasing squirrels all the time. And everybody's like, hey, we're all a little ADHD today, right? Well, yeah, because our environment, we have our digital life where the social media companies hire the biggest brains they can to figure out how to hack our attention and grab our attention and fracture our attention. Everybody's competing for it, right? So the common perception is kind of this hyperactive person bouncing from left to right and jumping off the walls, and then we're all a little bit like that. But the reality is, and the other part of the myth is, so either you're that and you're kind of bouncing all over and hyperactive, or the other popular kind of posing of it, framing of ADHD in the business press, it's like, oh, it makes you amazing. All these people, and there's a list of people who they believe have ADHD or ADHD, um, who are immensely successful, immensely impactful, and yeah, look, ADHD makes you a super person, and that is also sometimes a challenging thing as well because, it doesn't automatically, as we'll talk about, yes, it gives you all this creative fuel and energy, but it also makes it very hard to channel it sometimes. So there's this kind of bouncing back and forth between this myth of like, hey, you're the squirrel dog chasing the squirrel all the time, or you're the super person. And if you're not either of those things, and on different days, we're not those things, you have ADHD, then there's room there for people to be like, well, maybe I'm not even doing ADHD well, and I don't think that's helpful either. And I loved what Trevor Noah, former host of the Daily Show, comedian, said about it in a recent interview. He said, as somebody who has ADHD, it took me a long time to learn in life what that did to my brain, how that affected how I process time, an idea, thoughts, an object, an inquiry that I would have could be in some way, shape, or form affected for that. Everything he thought. They made it seem, this is really the big thing. They made it seem like you can't pay attention when in fact it's more that you can't choose what to pay your attention to. And I think that's a really important distinction. It's not a deficit of attention. It's that your brain is constantly attending to a lot of things, including things it's generating, things on the outside, external to you. And um, it's not always easy to control where your brain wants to go. And so we're going to get into why that is. So a big part of it, well, the biggest part of it is that ADHD brains are, in fact, a bit different than what might be described as a neurotypical brain. Now, there's two ways to break this down. The biggest thing is the research has shown that ADHD brains have lower levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. These are two really important neurotransmitters that help with reward mechanisms, help with executive function. Um, and so when they see a lower level of these, then organizing, prioritizing. We're going to go into all about executive function in just a second. There are also structural differences. The smaller prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain where we do the organizing and the task initiation and get ourselves going and our focus and our follow through, and our delayed reward mechanism. And then the cerebellum and the basal ganglia, these are places that are more core in terms of emotional regulation and general regulation and impulse control. So In ADHD brains, they've studied and they've seen that those sections of the brain are a little bit develop a little differently. And so what this comes down to is this idea of executive function. And their ADHD brains have less executive function to work with on a given day or a given period. So let's talk a little bit about executive function because it is the thing that is so crucial to success in life and business, right? And so, what are the things that executive function helps us do? Planning and prioritizing, super important. Organization, task initiation, just starting, right? Working memory. So there's the idea that we can retain things in short-term memory that we need to draw on again. Impulse control, that is again thinking about delayed reward. It's like we resist the impulse for the immediate reward so that we can get the long-term reward. This is something that's core to business. Emotional control, being able to stay regulated. Flexible thinking, which is interesting because ADHD brains can be very binary. Like it's either this or that, and it sometimes makes it hard to find other options when in fact there could be other options. And self-monitoring, which is the kind of the cruel joke of all this, is like harder to be aware that all this is going on. So executive function is super critical for life and business. And if you've got a brain that's got a little bit less of it, or you have to work harder to manage it. And if you don't know that, then you're just thinking, hey, I just guess I'm not good at that. Once you do know that, you said, oh, my brain works this way. I better figure out a way to work with it. So here's the things that really started to hit home, though. Like all these things are very like, okay, those are very kind of medical technical terms and executive function. I get that. But the quirks of the human brain that come with a lower executive function is really interesting. And this is where all the patterns of my life started to make sense. Time blindness. So the ability to estimate, not just to estimate how long things will take, but how long you've been taking, how long, the sense of whether of time passing, uh, and that kind of being late or underestimating how long it takes to do anything, or misjudging, um, how long you've been doing something if you're really into it. And it's very interest based. ADHD brains are always interest based. So if you're interested, a minute is going to feel like, uh, if you're not interested, a minute is going to feel like an hour. If you're super interested, an hour is going to feel like a minute. Decision fatigue and paralysis. So ADHD brain has to work harder to make decisions, and has a lower pool of executive function to draw on to do that. So once that is drained, you get this fatigue and paralysis, and that is, if you're leading a business, you're making decisions constantly. If you're living a life, you're making decisions constantly. But in a business, you're absolutely doing that, and other people are relying on you to make those decisions. And over time, over the course of a day, ADHD brain just has to work harder to do that. This thing called heightened rejection sensitivity dysphoria, they call it. And everybody, most people have this sense of like, well, I hate to be rejected, but I like to joke that, or say that ADHD brains are just like every other brain, except a lot more so. And so this just takes it to the next level. So that is really tough. When you think about having to manage people, like if your brain is already geared towards like, hey, I got to give this person, we have to have a little bit of an accountability conversation, or you have to give them some bad news, or you're dealing with a client or whatever. If you have to, risk rejection, it becomes harder. And that can lead to this kind of emotional dysregulation. I call them brain squalls. Instead of brainstorm, brain squalls are when your emotions just suddenly flare up. You get some news, you see something that isn't quite right because there's this kind of perfectionism that happens, and you have this squall for hours or 24 hours of like your brain just being spun up in all these different directions. These working memory deficits, this is super important. One of the things I highly encourage people I coach, entrepreneurs I coach, is when it comes to decision making, the most vital thing to have in front of us is our mission, vision, and values. And the thing about working memory is basically if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And so having our anchors to what we're really here to do and why we're here to do it, and the behaviors we value, having that insight anchored and keeps us from chasing shiny objects. And this idea of perfectionism, there's this sense of we have all these ideas, we can see the perfection in our brains, and we don't generally see the work it takes to get to that perfection. And so we tend to get disappointed in the early going before we can lock in. So lots of stuff they don't really tell you about ADHD, even when you get diagnosed. Like the American medical system tends to be a bit diagnose and prescribe. It's like, so is, you've got ADHD. Oh, here's your Adderall, off you go. But, it's really an understanding how your brain is functioning, how things are working that makes sense. And that goes for any brain, really. If it's whether it's ADHD, neurotypical, autistic, like as long as you know what you're dealing with and how it's working, then you can work with it. And there's a lot to work with, right? So it's ADHD brains have superpowers, right? That constant quest for dopamine and that constant quest for novelty, which is a feature of the ADHD brain, because that's how we keep our dopamine up, is constantly learning and creating and ideating. Like our brains are super powered on that part of things. And so ideation, creativity, out of box thinking, problem solving, we are awesome at that. And we love innovating solutions. And as long as it's in our interest, as long as we're interested in it, we will hyper focus on it. We will go down the rabbit hole. We will find new rabbit holes to go down on the topic. And it's amazing what an ADHD brain can come up with. There is a kryptonite here, though, and that is this immense power for learning, knowing, ideating, and creating is coupled with an underpowered capacity for doing. So this is what creates that sense of, hey, I know all this stuff. I have this experience, I have all this stuff in my brain, and yet I can't seem to perform to the level I know to what I know. Like I know what to do, but I'm having trouble doing what I know. And this was the really fascinating thing as I continue to do the research. Dr. Russell Barkley is one of the leading experts on ADHD. He's written many books, has spent a lifetime studying it. And he said something very powerful. He said ADHD isn't an attention disorder, it's a performance disorder, right? The attention is there. It's just the harnessing of it. It's the sort of riff on what Trevor Noah was saying. So, okay. So we've got all that. So the question then becomes so how does this relate to the, 2-hour workday? It was the promise of this talk. How does it relate to entrepreneurship? And that's what I'm going to hopefully tie it all together for you right now. So 3 things that we all have to do in order to make stuff happen, right? And we have to do this over time, all the time. As we need to decide stuff, we need to do stuff, and we need to sustain over time, right? We have to make the right decisions or the best decisions we can with the available information. We have to then put those decisions into action. And then in order to reap the reward of all that, we have to sustain that over time in ways that make sense. And if we do that in business and in life, we get rewarded. Our efforts compound, right? It's like the old thing that Bill Gates, I think, said or is attributed to. People underestimate what they can get done in the day. They underestimate what they can get done in 10 years. And that's because of this deciding every day, every week, deciding, doing, and sustaining. Right. So the thing that's a little challenge for the ADHD brain is like ADHD brains make all this a little harder. It's harder to decide when your brain is constantly flooded with options. It's harder to do when your executive function is limited, and it's harder to sustain when things become familiar and they become perhaps more routine and less novel. And over time, that pattern, if we're always starting, robs us of that compounding. So whether we're ADHD brain or whether we're not, we have to do these things. And the better we do these things, the more we reap the reward. So what I started to realize was the techniques that I was thinking about and working with because of limited executive function were actually a forcing mechanism, for things that entrepreneurs should be doing anyway. And as I was coaching, I coach a number of organizations who have ADHD team members or senior execs, and they really value what that team member brings to the table. They want to be able to have reap the full benefit and give them the support they needed. And as I started to get into it, I said, well, a lot of what helps ADHD brains function are things that are the right structures and constraints and ways to organize things that actually is really beneficial to any business, whether it's ADHD or not ADHD. It's just like doing the fundamentals of business will make things easier. And so ADHD through this lens can be kind of a forcing mechanism. And what I like to think about it as well is when I started to really understand that the game wasn't just how much can I get done, like productivity, the question is always how much can I get done, right? But when you have an ADHD brain and you realize you're actually managing or working with that, the question becomes how well can I manage my brain? And so one of the things that we all know, but ADHD brains have a little bit less of, is that we have peak hours during our day. And the way we think about it is we got to manage our executive function like a diabetic kind of manages insulin, right? We have a limited supply and we have to kind of regulate it. And so I just looking at myself and where I am in my life, I said, I have 2 hours of peak executive function each day. These are the time of day or these hours where my brain is fresh. My brain can take on hard tasks. My brain can focus without getting too distracted. And wouldn't it make sense to focus put the most important things I have to do into those 2 hours? Because if I want to be smart about when to start, and I have a limit of executive function to work with, then I better put the most important stuff in those periods. And everybody's got, different rhythms. Everybody's got, some days I might have more than 2 hours. Some days I might have less than 2 hours, depending on how my brain is doing, my sleep is doing. But if I reserve those 2 hours each day to put the most important things, and including identifying what the most important things are, the things like the classic quadrant 4, super impactful but not terribly urgent, like the things that actually move us forward and keep accelerate our compounding in business and life. Like if we keep thinking about when are we best able to like move those forward because they don't have the urgency. Like we need the extra, we need to be at our peak in order to like start them. Then let's focus on that, right? And so there's always a cycle with doing tasks of like getting into it, getting to the level of performance, and then winding down and then repeating that cycle. So this is where I started thinking about the 2-hour workday, and I thought about it in two really. If you think about it from all the decide, do, and sustain, I broke down to like really there's two really most important things of what, and the sustain is decide and do, and sustain is kind of repeating decide and do. So I think of deciding as like prioritizing, and as I said, okay, we've got to identify what's the most important thing, and the most important thing is generally what is going to move us forward the most in our business. What is going to over the long term make us create the most growth, create the most traction, and also move us towards where we actually want to go. And so for ADHD brains, we can lose track because of a deficit in working memory. We can lose track of our mission and vision very quickly because the world is full of shiny objects. The world is full of things that are really interesting, new trends, new news, the AI flavor of the week, whatever it happens to be, right? And we need to re-anchor to that mission vision. So that's why I recommend, a place where you can refer to it every day. And you know what? It turns out that that's good for any business because that is the basis, the ultimate basis for decisions. Does this thing that we're going to decide or prioritize, is it move us closer to our mission and vision more than the other thing that we could do? And so we want to take that and say, okay, we want to anchor to that. We might brain dump everything that we could possibly do. We might take five of those things, narrow them down to two or three, and then narrow them down to one to the next goal. Right? What's the next thing? If we've got one thing that we can do that moves forward to the most important thing, what would that be? We identify the bottleneck that's going to stop us from doing that, and then we find the right tasks to do that, and then we just keep breaking it down. And what we think about is using the 2 hour workday is like as a kind of control to what we can possibly do, right? So my goal with the 2 hour workday is if I nail my 2 hours of working on the deepest or the most impactful things that I can pretty much every day, no matter what happens in the rest of the other hours of the day, like I've already won. It's like it's gravy, right? And to be realistic, you're not gonna. It's very challenging to get down to a true 2 hour workday. But if we function as if we've got 2 hours, and those 2 hours every day have to like move us forward in a big way. And some days we'll do the whole two. Maybe we'll get an hour and a half. Maybe we'll get an hour. But whatever that habit of thinking that way of like, what is what can we reserve for that? And it's as I've done it, I just see the power. Like I just see the progress continuing to grow and grow in a way that uh, is it feels it really builds over time. And so how it functionally works is I break it down into four sprints. Um, 25 minutes of focus, 5 minutes of a brain break, and then release, right? And then the thing that's really fascinating about this is it forces you to confront uh, like the easiest thing in business and in life is to just throw more hours at it, and and you can, right? And there's a whole culture, and I'm not judging it or anything, but it's just like the whole culture of you just work harder, you just grind more. And in some ways, yeah, okay, you can do that. And in business, some days, some weeks are going to be like that, and some months are going to be like that. But the thing that just adding more hours does uh, is that it prevents us from making like the really hard decisions, the ruthless kind of prioritization, right? If the answer is always add more hours or add more resources, then then we're deferring decisions, and we might not be prioritizing to level that we want and that will be best serving us, right? There's no award for whoever works the most hours to get the result wins. It's who gets the result or who gets where they want to go, and you should get rewarded for doing it with the most efficient way. And so all this is to say that when you think about your week, and I think about the week as the real guiding like container for progress, because in my ADHD brain, a year is way too long. I can pick out a far away goal, but it's so far away. In my ADHD brain, with its time blindness, and it's now or it just doesn't exist. A quarter can be slightly manageable. A month is too big to take in, but a week is good. A day is too narrow because too many things can throw off a single day. And so this is how I organize my week is like I don't even really look at my calendar so much as my planning tool. I use this as part of this dashboard I've created for myself, and I'll show you to the next slide. But I just have every day what are my 2 hour workday priorities, and then other stuff. Right. And I'll look at my calendar and figure out what goes where. But I know that, and on my calendar, I blocked off, here's my 2 hour workday. Here's my 2 hours. And for me, I do it co-working with body doubling with a group that I lead called Doing Tribe. And because I find that for me and for many ADHD brains, just showing up and working with somebody in parallel, telling people what you're going to work on, and then just working side by side, even virtually, just gets me to focus, gets me to show up. So it's a really interesting when you start pushing yourself to say, okay, if I have only 2 hours, what would I do? If I only had 2 hours on this day, what would move my business forward? What would move my life forward the most? And you start to have to make kind of more ruthless prioritization decisions. And it's those hard decisions up front that ideally and generally make things easier as you go, right? It's the deferring of those hard decisions and those ruthless prioritizations that keep things harder over time, in my experience. So my goal for you today was to put this idea into your head if you weren't already familiar with it, to think about if you really only had 2 hours to work, what would you do with it? And how would you prioritize? And what would be the things that you would put in every day? And I encourage you to like, this is, a riff a little bit off of deep work, and Cal Newport's deep work is like, if you carve out that time and you put the right things in that time, then everything else that happens during the day, is kind of gravy, and you'll always be making progress. So I put this into a dashboard for myself. If you guys want, a link to it, it's a free template. It's a tool called Xtiles. It's free to use on with this template that I created, but it keeps all the things that I talk about here about keeping your magnetic north in. I like to keep my self-care and my decisions, and my 2-hour workday priorities, and kind of walks through the stuff that I teach in the Focus Formula course that I have. Cool. And so just the last thought is, if there's one takeaway, is everything comes down to ruthless focus, right? And focus is always about what is as much about what you're not going to pay attention to at the moment as what you are going to pay attention to. And that's the hardest thing for an ADHD brain, is because we're always trying to pay attention to everything. And so it's been a really fascinating journey to say that the things that, now that I understand my brain better and how much, how to work with it, and how that it's got actually more limited in the ability to apply my focus, the better I think I've gotten at managing myself and managing my business and having it move forward. And it all comes down to this ruthless focus. So that's what I got today. Happy to take questions from Michael, or however we want to do it, but it's been a pleasure, and I hope I've given you something to think about for today and for going forward.
That was really excellent, Steve. Hey, one of your slides, you have information about yourself, how to get in contact with you. Otherwise, people can go right now to mondayslive.com, and Steve's profile is right there, and his contact if you scroll down. But maybe either take off, if you have another slide for that, or you can take off the slide. Let's see.
Yeah, no, I can. The easiest way is, we're going to go way back.
Sure.
We have my email address, steve@steveaugustcoaching.com. That's the website as well, steveaugustcoaching.com. Got a bunch of stuff up there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I have the ADHD Entrepreneurs newsletter on LinkedIn, where I write almost every day. And if you've ever suspected that you are ADHD and want to take a first directional step, on the site, steveaugustcoaching.com, you can find a quick assessment called "Are You an ADHD Entrepreneur?" So encourage you to visit the site, and or just reach out and get in touch.
It's really excellent. And so if you're just hearing this off of audio, though, then you can still go to mondayslive.com, read the profile, and there'll be a replay, so tell your friends. And again, Steve's email is steve@steveaugustcoaching.com. Steve, we got one comment right now. It says, been really interesting. My 32-year-old daughter has recently been diagnosed, and listening to you, I definitely have the traits. So yeah, that was what Jana just commented.
There's a lot of adults are getting diagnosed because it is genetic. They've learned that it is genetic, and so when adults are taking their kids in, and their kids are getting diagnosed, whatever stage of life they're in, and then they start talking about it and they start sharing the traits. Like, for instance, I always was curious about why I was one of those people who always seemed to interrupt people before they finish their sentence, and that is an ADHD trait, it turns out. And my mom has that. And so, once you start seeing it in the patterns, then you start to, and it's a spectrum, right? It's like people have it in different degrees or different facets of it. And so I see there's a lot more. And the good thing about right now is there seems to be a lot less stigma about it, that people are kind of saying, hey, not that just it's not just kids bouncing off the wall, adults have it, and people who aren't hyper have it. And it's what I like to think of it as, it's not, medically they have to call it a disorder, but I just think of it as a different brain types. It's just a different type of brain, and it works a little differently. It has its strength, it has its challenges, and we work with it. And to me, that's we're going to need in the world we need all kinds of brains to solve what we've got in front of us.
Yeah, so how do you see society right now where more of us are getting diagnosed? And so some people say, well, it's part of a new trend, or the diagnosis processes have gotten better, and we've all been this way. With technology and so many, as you call it, shiny objects distracting us, we're in a different world than when we were kids.
Hmm.
Although in a previous conversation, I mentioned to you that I thought my first sign of ADD was an incident that happened after school where I was just in a haze, and that haze never quite left. So,
Yeah.
well, what do you say about this, Steve? Like where things are in contemporary times in society, are there alarm bells for you sounding off, or are we just looking at new tools to help us navigate?
Yeah, I think what I'm seeing in the people that I'm encountering, because what I've done is I've just said, okay, I'm at this stage, I'm just going to share everything, right? I share what my medications are. I share
Sure.
if I'm having a day where my brain is just freaking out and it's useless. And because I think it's so important to share that, because if I do, hopefully people will reach out or feel like at least, hey, you know, there is more openness allowed about it. And I do have people who reach out and say, either for themselves or for a loved one, and say, hey, I think they're struggling with this. And to me, I think the more we've gone on, and the more we understand about how different types of brains work, the more we can actually, work with them. And it's been really, really touching to see, different businesses that have reached out to me, say, hey, we've got this amazing employee or this amazing team member. Um, on one level, they're really amazing. On another level, we sometimes struggle with this kind of focus and performance. And is there something you could help us with? And once they start understanding how the ADHD works, then suddenly they can kind of create structures and management and roles, um, that make more sense, so that they can leverage the most out of this person, and the person can uh, feel right about it. And it's a conversation. And to me, as somebody with ADHD, my goal is to help people act as a translator and help people understand that what they're seeing in terms of behaviors is not probably what they think it is sometimes.
And as we talked about earlier too, that with Mondays, which is designed as a way to help people kick off, we should probably do a little bit of a plug in case people are wondering, like, what is this that we're watching? This is an opportunity for you to kick off the week. Every week we feature, a different speaker. And in some area, you could say, I'm the spectrum, so we can have the big picture horizon where we can sort of tap into kicking off your week or your day right. And we've had some really invaluable insights from Steve August today, who is the founder of the ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. And if you're just catching it live now on YouTube, you can go to mondayslive.com to read more about Steve, or go to his website. And so yeah, give your website again, Steve, and your email.
SteveAugustCoaching.com. It's a bit of a
Steve,
mouthful. You can
yeah,
also
and
go
then
to ADHD dash accelerator for the accelerator site as well. And the quiz, if you go to the main site, SteveAugustCoaching.com, you'll also see the Are You an ADHD Entrepreneur quiz.
so we thought, like with Mondays Live, we could offer a segment or a breakout room if you happen to identify with this and go, hey, I love Monday motivation. I need more. So this would be an opportunity to look at, well, we'll be launching a VIP program that will offer on the inside more time with our guest speaker and group coaching and other tools, which could be helpful. And so we've been thinking about this, and that will be something that we would love to entertain your comments and input. and what you thought about today's stream and just the idea of Mondays live. So we have a few more minutes, Steve. I mean, I'm looking at a couple of comments here and stuff like that. So I'm in recovery and just done some research in higher addiction among ADHDs. Any insight into that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see the research that they're starting to do. And, there's all these overlaps in symptoms between ADHD, addiction, bipolar and depression and things like that. So sometimes it's hard to tell what's the underlying cause and what's the expression of it. But one study has shown that people with ADHD are many times more prone to depression than the people who are have depression are to ADHD. And I think, what I talked about earlier on is like that ADHD is a performance disorder that you have knowledge, you have things, you have talent, you have creativity, you have innovation, you have these things, and yet you get to the end of the day and you wonder where the time went. And then over time, that adds up where it becomes, I don't trust myself to perform. I don't trust myself to do stuff. And then you start seeing and it's not that you're not working hard, right? ADHD people are not like this is myth that they're lazy. It's no, we're working really hard. We have to in order to we have to work like 4x harder to get the same thing done that maybe a neurotypical could just sit down and do. Like that's exponentially harder for us. So if you do that over enough time, and I know like it was interesting because, being totally transparent, I've been in therapy and treated for depression in my life, but I never really felt like I had depression. I always felt like there was something else going on. And that was part of what clicked for me with the ADHD is like, oh no, like depression might be an expression of feeling frustrated over time. Um, that I feel like I'm underperforming or that I can't give myself downtime because as soon as I finish something, um, that my brain floods me with new ideas that make me feel like I'm already behind. That, ADHD brains have a hard time starting if there's no immediate consequence. And so what happens is for an ADHD brain to start, there needs to be looming consequences, which means that most of like the big stuff that gets done is really an exercise in avoiding consequence versus attaining reward. So it's not like you get it done and you're like, yes, I earned my reward. It's more like, whoa, got past that one. And then like I might have a reprieve until the next one. And you do that over time and over life, enough of a period of living. And yeah, it can cause a brain to get a little depressed. So there's a lot of overlap and I encourage you to keep digging and researching about it because if any of this is resonating, if you're out there, is keep looking at it because I feel like I had one person on LinkedIn say, "Hey, isn't it just like back in the '70s there was no such thing as ADHD. It was just like youthful energy." And I was like, and I had to write and say, well, back in the '70s, what was our computing power? What was our medical imaging ability? What was our state of understanding about the human brain? And so, it was like we've learned a lot, and we're coming along. Um, but
You're
yeah,
not quite right
it's
though, because back in the 70s, Steve, if you were diagnosed, maybe the hyperactivity part, you were given Ritalin.
yeah,
It's been going on for quite some time, just maybe not either misidentified or. Yeah, so we are in different times, in the sense that, there's the reality or the realization that let's say, my own individual experience that, challenged by, like you said, you're having all these different ideas, and as soon as you have a new idea, you're immediately behind on it
yeah,
because in the structure of things, I'm hyper visually, right? So I'm already
yeah,
seeing something and it's a great idea and you're excited by it, but now you're having to chase after it. So you've heard of Wayne Dyer, right? Where,
yeah, yeah,
so this was a conversation I had a long time ago when I was doing a success club, which led me into this work of motivation speaking. He goes, Mike, your success club is a great idea. You're helping people achieve their goals, but do you ever think about that you're just setting people up to chase them and they're just going to be chasing one goal after another goal and that's going to become their life story? And I go, well, yeah, that is sort of my life story, isn't it? In the way that there was some recognition of that, and so there is something about achieving the goal and having that reward and the satisfaction that you've attained something. And in your case, 5 successful exits. I mean, that's no small achievement, Steve.
Well, that
And
was my clients. I have had two, but my clients have gotten five.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah,
Well, then maybe our working
can't claim
together.
credit for all of them.
You've been a part of it in coaching, so you see sort of from the inside what's going on. So I guess having these realizations on some level, you would get an aha. So whether like in your case where you were diagnosed a couple of years ago, recognizing what you had to deal with. But for other people, maybe they're not sure, but they like the other comment earlier that they recognized symptoms or things that they identified with the traits that you talked about. We're having to, I guess, live in a certain period of time where we feel compromised and we're never quite where we want to be, and dealing with, whatever the distractions are or challenges of day-to-day reality, whether it be the economy, politics, or, relationships and so forth. So, I like if you're just catching us live right now on Mondays, Steve August was talking about the 2 hour workday. So I would either watch the replay or go to his website, and we'll reintroduce you again in a second here as we maybe go into this question. What is it that you would, with working with your clients and as a coach, what is it that you look for and for them to know that they've got a handle on this, or at least in the capacity that they're functional? At least, you can guide them or gear them towards that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and I want to key on that word functional. They're definitely functional, but the cost of that function is high, right? And sometimes not as sustainable, right? Whether it's the effort, the cost. And so what we try to do is like the important thing for me is not just the success, but are you able to actually enjoy it? Are you able actually to like get to the end of the day and be like, okay, I did the day. I felt good about the day. Some things went well, some things went sideways, but I can put it down and I can put it down. And same thing for the weekend. Can you, because that's what I found is I never be able to put it down. And you do that, you know, if you're into it, it's great, but over time, your brain needs to rest. And so how I work with people is again, going back to that question is not necessarily how much can you get done, how productive can you be, how much can you achieve, but how well can you manage your brain? How well can you manage your brain? Because if you get all this stuff done and you know, you're unable to enjoy it, you're unable to celebrate it, you're unable to, uh, get any satisfaction from it, which I've seen with ADHD brains, then, there's this feeling that, oh, I just need to do more. And then like, there's one therapist I had talked with said it's the fallacy of our future self. It's like once we get to this place, we're going to be a different person, right? If I achieve this thing on the external, I will become this thing internally. And the reality is the internal shift is has to be independent of the external shift.
Right,
You know,
that reflects on the chase that if I can just capture that. So I relate it to the illusion of life, where people talk about living in illusion or hallucinations, but the illusion is always thinking that the problem is out there. If I just get that resolved, that's going to take care of it, which is part of also, you could say, what we're dealing with, right? Because people living in illusion are not realizing their own projections, their own thinking and processes that are keeping them actually from achieving maybe a happy, peaceful, successful life. So in your terms of having this fulfillment and that they have achieved something, are you then coaching them on keeping a journal? How are they reflecting on it so they can better understand it?
well, journaling can help. I've done journaling in the past. I find journaling good for brain dumping. I can't read my writing, so I never go back to it. I can't decipher it. To me, it's more about the first thing we look about is we think about is when is your brain at its best, and let's build your life around that, or let's build your day around that, and thinking about how do we again manage that executive function so that you get the best return on it, and we start there, and then we look at the things around that in terms of if we're navigating, you know, a stressful time, are we doing the minimum of self-care and giving people this sense like ADHD brains will go binary. Like either I'm running, 5 miles a day and eating right, or I'm skipping that and eating pizza for breakfast. Right.
Oh, you're
It
happy.
can, yeah. And it's sort of like, yes, we can find a good, better, best kind of way of thinking about it. So we're not so tied into like I get this way. It's one of the things that coaches have really helped me with is like I get very like, oh, I can only do it one way, this way, or this other way. And it puts me in this position of like not being able to do either because the way I imagine it is too far away and the way I'm doing it now isn't viable in my mind. So it's just a way to put me. And so thinking about the little tricks that the brain is playing on us in terms of helping people identify what they really want, because we can get really in our heads and have see something and it's a shiny object and we're like, oh, this is what I want to do now, or this is what I want to be, or this makes so much sense. And it's an intellectual kind of why, and it's a dopamine kind of like hit, but it's not really like then it fades, and then you're like, well, did I ever really believe that, or did I ever really think that? And helping people understand, okay, is this a full body kind of yes? Is this something that you feel, or is it just something that your brain is spinning up? And just kind of continually to raise their awareness and then give them the support structures to show up and do each day so that they get a taste of, yeah, I was able to show up. I got a little bit done. Maybe I didn't get the whole 2 hours done, but there was something I needed to do that I was dreading. I couldn't push forward. We pushed forward on it. We have an interaction that we need to navigate. It helped them through that. And to me, that's the most gratifying thing. And from entrepreneurs in business, the thing I've been working on this is how we make a less distracting business, right? How do we distill things down so that our business isn't constantly throwing shiny objects at us? And to me, I've just come into this thesis that it's just our business is our core offer, which is our promise to fix somebody's pain for a price that makes sense. And our product or service is our plan, our delivery mechanism for making good on the promise. And we've got that offer as our core of our business. That's what we're here to deliver. And then we have to get people to that offer. So we'll have another offer that gets people to raise their hand. I mean, we'll call it a lead magnet or whatever. It's like, hey, I'm thinking about things the way you're thinking about things, and I'm working on a problem that you're having, and I have an angle on it that could give you a way. And then there's probably an offer in between to get them to take the next step. And if we just look at those offers and create a machine to like get people to your first offer, get them from your first offer to either your core offer or your main offer or your what I call your customer ID. It's like you're not just a lead, you're a potential customer. And we just focus on those three things uh, and do them in a sequence. Hopefully it should be less distracting. It should be more simple. And that's part of what we do in the accelerator is try to simplify people's businesses.
Yeah, that's a great goal, and I can see how the outcome would be achieved that way. So just one quick last question, and then we'll probably wrap up here. So this accelerator, I could say, well, is it just for ADHD people who are entrepreneurs? But obviously, so the real question is it group coaching, or are you doing a one-on-one or doing like special workshop sequences?
Yeah, the accelerator, I love this format. It is a group program, and you don't have to be officially diagnosed ADHD to join. You can, if you just feel like, or we have people who have just joined who aren't officially diagnosed, but they feel like, oh, the support structure is really good. So what I found with coaching programs that I've been in is like they supported, even if the business coaching was really good, they didn't really support the ADHD brain. That didn't give me the level of support that I needed to really implement and succeed. So this is what ADHD Accelerator does. We have a weekly office hours where everybody comes and we can go over which part of that system that we were talking about, which part of their offer or stack or their machine, their lead machine. And they can get help from me and from the people. It's a great community, really supportive. And then each day we have co-working sessions, body doubling sessions from 8 a.m. Pacific. They start at 8 a.m. Pacific, but each day people show up and they're like, here's what I'm working on. And not everybody shows up to every day, but that consistency. And so then we have the curriculum on the online course that goes through, takes them through the offer, the focus formula training, and all that. And then every third Wednesday of every month, we have a workshop that I invite, advertise publicly as well.
That's
And
really good.
between all that, we get people lined up. We make their businesses as simple as possible, and then make sure they're clear on their rocks, what they want to get done this quarters, and then make sure, try to like keep everybody checks in each week to talk about how they doing, what rock, what project, what wins, what lessons. So that structure really helps people make immense progress.
It's amazing, Steve. So you've been watching Mondays Live. Steve August, who runs the ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator, has been our guest, and you can watch the replay on mondayslive.com. Steve, what's your website again and best way to contact you?
Yeah, it's steveaugustcoaching.com. And you can find the Are You an ADHD Entrepreneur quiz, as well as information about the accelerator and the focus formula, of course. And I'm also, of course, on LinkedIn, is my main social channel. Uh, uh, and that's, you can find me there, and you can subscribe to my ADHD Entrepreneurs newsletter on LinkedIn as well.
It's been a pleasure. We've been chatting on LinkedIn for a while about getting you on, and here you are. We did it. So you're watching mondayslive.com, Monday Morning Motivation, where we give different insights into productivity, goals, time management, and how to function as an ADHD entrepreneur. We'll be back next week with our next guest. Thanks for watching mondayslive.com. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for having me. Have a great week, everybody.
Okay. All right, good. So we could still wrap a little bit because I think we're still live streaming. So if we want to do anything as a final thing, but pretty good. We're right on the hour, which I like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I haven't been able to follow the live stream, but I've just been focused on the Zoom and the presentation. So
Yeah, I haven't been able to do it either. But I know we're on it. And then I moved the mondays.org and put it on LinkedIn. So people like Annick, Stanek, and a few other people kind of put it into their comments. So that's pretty cool.
nice.
Yeah. Well, and so I think we're still streaming on YouTube. So let me just check real quick. But go ahead. Anything else you want to share, talk about just between us and what we're doing?
Yeah. Yes, and YouTube.
James says thank you.
Yeah. No, that was great. I'm continuing to tell my story and hopefully give people the opportunity to learn things that may help them as they navigate their journey. And so it's always great to have the opportunity, and I really appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, so I think it too, like helping you get the word out there, and then also combining different communities, bringing back traffic at least Monday mornings to something that people can do to start their week off. Like again, this is a new idea, but I love the idea of branding, owning Mondays. So that's something, at least one
Yeah.
marker in the you could say the cyberspace world that raises the flag and go, hey, we're here, and people will find you that way, and we can feature other guests and build this out. And the more you could say viable community we have, we could have this VIP membership section and sell into like a funnel other programs that are being offered.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah, I
you
love
thought
it.
about the 2 hour workday being a book, like compared to the
So the
ferry
4 hour work
system?
week. Yeah, it's whatever is 4 hour work week or whatever.
That's an innovation
I
in the
have, I
work
mean,
day.
it's not totally mine. I mean, I've seen other people talk about it, but yeah, I think there's something to that. I haven't figured out what the framing for the book there is a book in making here, but I think I'm not ready to turn that into a book until I uh
Right. So
like do my stump speech a few more times.
yeah. So you talk a lot about, and I think we had this conversation early on too, like your people's mission and their vision and their purpose. And my idea is to turn MVP into a book and have
Hmm.
different contributors do their part. So it could lend itself to be almost like a monthly magazine type format, like Mondays, which just ties into how we be at our best. People say the most valuable player, or in the SaaS world, minimum value proposition. I see it as mission, vision, and purpose that has meaning, value, and passion. So
Yeah.
I think that could be a conduit. And then we just kind of change our languaging. So we're always referencing this MVP. and becomes a new terminology. So people kind of recognize like, oh, okay, stay a bit more attuned. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
so I
it's
think I'd
awesome.
like to do that in the next couple months actually, because I think the timing's right for it. And I don't know if I mentioned you, I don't know if we're still streaming. I should find if I start bragging. But if you look at my bio and stuff like that, Stephen Covey was one of my mentors at an early age in the '90s, and he gave me a whole lecture about having purpose,
Yeah.
and actually recorded this on cassette, and I'm countering him on some stuff, which is really daring to do at that age. But
Yeah, no, I mean, but I think that's what that age is for. I mean, is to force the old guys to defend themselves a little bit, and I think it makes everything um, better. But that's cool. You have that cassette. That's awesome. Yeah, because
yeah, I gotta
he's the
get
quadrant
tuned
four
up.
guy, right? Which is Eisenhower's quadrant. Like Stephen Covey, he's the seven habits, right, of highly
Right.
successful people. But one of those habits is like always working, consistently working on the most important things, even if they're not urgent.
Yeah, yeah, the priority focus and sharpening the saw, so we're continually um, at our best. Yeah, I really, given the background, that's the time I was doing the Success Club, but we would always run into each other, and he just took an interest in me. It was kind of a weird thing, maybe he saw me as being that young up and coming dude, so, in the
Yeah.
motivation world at that
Remember
time, and
that those times when we were the young and up and comers?
it's the truth. Like, it's like something happened to us, lightning strike on the planet or whatever.
Yeah. Now we're old
um,
up and comers.
Yeah, and we're helping the next generation. Although some of you give a handout to some people, they don't quite get it. They think there's a catch, whatever, or they're just not seeing it. Well, hopefully we'll turn track on this. I'd like to think about this MVP book that maybe by spring, um, even if it's an ebook and it's the first edition of it, just gets out there because I've got different people who have the different pieces, whether they're talking about their mission or their vision and the purpose, and I want to combine them, but they are distinct that you have to get them all for it to
Yeah.
work. Yeah. I think the more we do this work, the more our name and appreciation for what we're trying to accomplish in our older, younger age will come to fruition. It's
Yeah.
definitely a different period of time. I mean, I feel like we're mid-decade and there's a lot of stuff happening right now that's just sort of, it's mind-blowing in itself. And gosh, it's got to be overwhelming for some people for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, the things come so fast and furious. Like, I don't know. I have to some days my brain does get away from me, and the last few days has just been doom scrolling the news over just everything. It's all coming so fast and furious,
I kind of turned it
and I know.
off, in a way. I do catch it once a week at least to sort of look at everything on Google News or NPR, and so the week wrap up and go, oh my God, it's like, but they keep talking about the same things over and over again. And some
Yeah.
things are very disastrous. And of course, if it bleeds, it leads, and it's
Yes.
horrible.
That's the thing is
It's
like they know, I have the awareness that there's only two stories in news. One, you should be scared that you're missing out, or you're be scared that you're a part of this. Yeah.
we should have recorded this part as the after hours thing. Although again, I think we're still streaming on the YouTube part. So when the YouTube live stream started, you already started beginning. So I had to go into YouTube just to set it up for a quick second. I've now known we used to have a person doing a Zoom thing, but she has other things kind of going on. She's overseas, so her time wise
Mhm.
versus this stream. But it's just a second or two, I think. But I think there'll be a recording on YouTube that will be the recap, but the live Zoom I did record in its entirety. So I will send you that file so you have the video file and you can do whatever you want with that. And then I'll also put it up on YouTube and I'll put the replay under your profile page.
Great.
Um, yeah, and you can do
Yeah, I'll
whatever you
put it
want.
up on my LinkedIn profile and as a featured post, and both all my three profiles, and then I have one for myself, one for Steve August Coaching, and one for ADHD Entrepreneur Accelerator. I seem to accumulate them, but and then I'll also put it. I have a blog section on the website, so
Okay.
I'll put a mention to it there too.
Well, that's really great. Yeah, I'll do that next so I just keep it fresh in mind and just have it going in case people still keep coming to check out the page. Um, One other thing, Steve, is an earlier talk. I got to go back to see. It's hard to believe now. We're starting like a little like a TED speaker type community where we're going to be veterans of the Mondays program. She
Hmm.
was she's up in Minneapolis, and she was saying that her work and her is a bit more. She was some people are found for me, you know what I mean, and I'm introduced, and I didn't realize it, that she was more like, she's a preacher in real life. She's like a reverend, you know. I said, well, we're
Mhm.
not quite like that for Mondays, but you can make it fire and brimstone if you want from the motivational point of view. And then at the end, give more of a spiritual, religious reference. And so she was totally cool about that. But she came back to me and said, you know, what you're doing here is like, is reminiscent of maybe developing a fellowship. You know how people have fellowship in different communities. And I kind
Mhm.
of laughed at that because years ago, I had the idea of creating what was called like a friendship fellowship. That website is up and was kind of created during COVID, but I haven't gone back to it. The friendshipfellowship.com would be where we empower each other's friendship, creating a community that way. Because we know we have an epidemic of loneliness going on right now and separation in our society. So this could be something that's more proactive. Like we've become friends. We just like to think so that we have a connection that's more than just you being the guest on Mondays or my buddy on LinkedIn. So that maybe we could start a movement in a way that creates community. So it can be endearing in the way that, yeah, we are going to get more traffic and more interest and brings attention to what we're doing in our work, but at the same time allows people to feel more empowered in their friendship so they can go back and like, oh, I miss this guy Joe. I haven't seen him in years. I don't know, you know, it was before the internet, so we haven't been able to keep in touch or make the connections more impactful. Maybe they do a community pause thing together and also allowing to make new friends because you could invite people into this community of a friendship fellowship. And the fellowship to me, when I thought of the idea was more on an academic level, because like you're a fellow in the work, you know, like at an institution, right? So, that kind of think tank fellow, you know, but of course she saw it like bridging a non-denominational fellowship, which is a great idea. So I want to just plant that one into your seed into our
Yeah.
brains because that would be a way to bring us back together in another format, you know, really build a
You know,
community
yeah. I mean, I keep it in mind. I mean, as you know, as an aged brain, I have to kind of manage my focus. So and uh, so
you
my
would just do
focus
that
is.
part, you know what I mean? Like this is you'd be
Mm.
part like you wouldn't have to take on a special role, but you would be recognized as the ADHD coach, and that would bring people back to your site. And like you do for your what you call it, not the happy hour, but your daily check-in for the
Hmm.
what do you
Yeah,
call it? The
my co-working hours,
oh,
I
your
call
co-working
it.
hours. Okay, yeah. I was calling it happy hours.
Hmm. Well,
It's one of
people
my
are happier on them than they are if they don't get stuff done.
well, exactly. So maybe the community like aspect of what this is, and again, like you and I, you know, we got a lot of different things and how to put them in perspective. Maybe it's a monthly type things where people come into it and bring more and more community, but the new people that come in find out about what all the other stuff that we're doing, and they have that satisfaction level of, oh, you know, I'm part of a bigger world or community. They haven't entered into coaching or don't know about these services yet, but they do feel some connection, you know. I think that's a good service. And that could be a membership organization too, you know, on a, could be leadership training, that type of thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I put that out there because that's the big picture. Like, well, what is Monday's part of? Like, we're in the orbit of many, you could say, celestial ideas, and yet there's a cosmology of something that of a bigger force of nature that maybe we're going to contribute to. And that's kind of where I'm going with my work anyway. The illusion that I'm going to lead a self-liberation movement. Yeah.
Well, it's a laudable goal.
Oh yeah, very good. Well, thanks for being a part of this. I think it was really great. So I want to continue the conversation. You know, bring you back in the future. I really, I think I will call a meeting probably in March for the MVP book,
Okay.
and maybe it'll be our guest speakers and a couple of people I know.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm trying to find the live stream address. What's the profile that you have it under on YouTube?
Oh, you just go to mondays.org. See if we're streaming. That's a good question to see if we're still streaming. Let me tap
Yeah, here
into
we
it.
are.
Yeah, great. Okay. Hey, folks.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good. That's very, very meta.
yeah. Yeah. So I think when it finishes, it'll just make its own link for replays, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken. Um, yeah, well, you know, I mean, since we are still live and streaming, do you want to say anything else since we're still going for a minute or two? And
Yeah, no,
how's
I mean it's
everything?
for me it's been a pleasure to be able to talk about this subject. That's something that's had a huge impact on my life and share my experience with other people and hope other folks who uh, get whether they're ADHD brains or not, if they're leading a business and they want to play with this concept of the 2 hour workday, better manage their priority and focus, and uh, it's great. Yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's really great. Yeah, I guess we'll wrap up here, Steve. Hey, I mentioned this before, but if you have the chance, just for my own edification, check out that masstrance.com. I could put it into the chat here. It's just how it's spelled, masstrance.com. Because I'm just wondering one idea that I just never thought of until this moment, actually. Could it be, in sociology or something, French word, which I'm not saying correctly, but the milieu, what we're living in, you could say the temporality of what we're experiencing right now. Is it possible that at least maybe someone would be on the edge? It does put certain sections into society into, not necessarily an artificial reality. I mean, although people would say virtually, we're experiencing some of this right now, that we're engaged in something that is causing people to experience some traits of ADHD that, whether it's excessive advertising, trying to live up to this lifestyle, this chase in life, that we were talking about, referring earlier, that if those, we could say impediments to just natural life, about the pressures and economic, situation that people are dealing with, would be maybe allowing them to be more free in the way that they could express themselves. So my question is all these things kind of causing us to experience, whether it's legitimate ADHD, but some aspect of the experience of it? That's what mass trance is maybe saying. I never really thought about that until now. So I might add that somewhere in there. It's not a published book yet. I'm still working on it. Obviously, I've had the idea since the 90s, even before Matrix, but it is very similar in that regard. If we think that we're living in a simulation, so are we not acting out certain type of identity that if we were to be diagnosed? I mean, I'm not, deferring off that there isn't something neurologically going on, but something imposed on us that's causing our brain to maybe be in that a reactive mode, or chemically, I'm having to produce more endorphins to just compensate,
Yeah. I think,
Yeah.
it's all work in progress.
Well, yes, it is. Yeah. So, but could there be something in the recognition that we are in a mass trance, that this is sort of, you could say this relates to if you lived under, Nazism in Hitler's Germany, that was a society in mass trance, no question about it. And are we functioning in a certain way because we're hypnotized in our nature that's causing a dysfunction in our ability to be fully conscious? I mean, that's a deep question, but it's sort of like, my God, we're getting right at sort of, you could say, the wellspring of things. So anyway, something to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. To you, because it's sort of
Cool.
like, well, who else can I talk about these kind of things? But that could be something else in the future, maybe a summit or some kind of panel that we could all be contributing to. I'm not an expert in your field, though, so that's the only thing. I recognize something that's gone on as a social psychologist, but how do you identify that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great, Steve.
Well, this has been great. And thanks again for the invitation. And I'm gonna jump off here, try to grab a few winks before I start my co-working session.
That's right. Yeah, anybody else watching right now, just go to mondayslive.com and you'll get to see the whole replay just a little bit, and come back every week to find all kinds of new adventures. Mondays.org for the live stream and mondayslive.com for what we're all about. Thanks again, Steve. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So we'll wrap here, and yeah, have a great week. So we'll be in
Thanks
touch
for
through
having me.
LinkedIn, and I'll be emailing. Oh, you know what? On LinkedIn, I'm going to confirm the email after I get the recording. So I'll at least give you the video, and then you can play it. But I'll also send it to you by email. Hopefully, I got the right one.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Good stuff.
good stuff. Thanks again, Steve. It was really great having you on. It opens up a whole window to a lot of other possibilities, which I know for us is going to be like, what?
Yep, exactly.
All right.
All right.